Your Superior Self, episode 48.
So he was living there, and he was constantly getting into fights with my girlfriend. And so while I was gone on a business trip down to the south to Kanchanaburi, I came back, and he had gotten in a huge fight with her and had strangled her. And so at that point, I was terrified. And the police there in Thailand have kind of a deserved reputation as being bad guys. They do torture people. And so I was terrified of going to them. And in retrospect, I did not have a clear head on me at that time, and I made the wrong decision.
What is up, Superior Nation? Welcome to your favorite podcast, Your Superior Self. I am your host, Trey Downs, blue-collar worker turned into blue-collar entrepreneur. And I know you guys are on the edge of your seats after that intro. I know I am, and I'm excited to have for you on the show today T.M.Hoy, also known as Mark. He spent some time in a Thai prison, and now he has written a book called Lasting Happiness, and he shares his experiences inside of this book. And before I dive into the interview, which is pretty powerful, I wanted to go over a book that I'm recently reading. It is called Mastery by Robert Greene. He is the same author who wrote the 48 Laws of Power, and he's becoming one of my favorite authors. This book really speaks to me on so many different levels. I highly suggest that you guys go pick it up today. And the part that I'm reading today is very early on in the book, and it goes like this. The process of following your life's task all the way to mastery can essentially begin at any point in life. The hidden force within you is always there and ready to be engaged. The process of realizing your life's task comes in 3 stages. First, you must connect or reconnect with your inclinations, that sense of uniqueness. The first step then is always inward. You search the past for signs of that inner voice or force. You clear away the other voices that might confuse you, parents, and peers. You look for any underlying pattern, a core to your character that you must understand as deeply as possible. And I'm going to pause on step 1 because it is that important. You have to take a look inward and figure out who you are and what you want in this life. Look back on your life and see if there were signs that were trying to point you in a different direction. Is this your awakening right now? And what I mean by awakening, are you really becoming conscious to the possibilities that you want to achieve? And what I want to emphasize on when you take this inward look at yourself and bring your consciousness to your abilities to achieve anything in this world is that it doesn't matter how old you are when you have this awakening. You can be 70 years old. You could be 22 years old. It doesn't matter. I was 33 when I had this awakening, when the universe was like, Trey, you're not following any signs that I'm sending you. I'm going to interfere now, and I'm going to hand you this book. Literally, hand me this book called Resisting Happiness. And that is when I realized that there is this negative force every day that is just trying to win the day, that is trying to make you not go out and work out, that is trying to make you not read that book, that is influencing that inner voice that is telling you that you can't do something, that you're not smart enough, that you're not good looking enough, that you're not brave enough. And I had to awaken to this fact that that is not true, that I am capable of things that I never thought that I could do. And everyone has this power inside of them. You have to awaken to it. And once you awaken to that, you are at the starting line. You have to figure it out what you want to do next. If you want to get better at an instrument, if you want to get a better body, if you want to get better education, if you want to get a better job, that is the first step, is finding out what it is that you want to be, who you are, and owning that. And then the next step is to start putting in the work, start doing the processes that it's going to take to get to where you want to be. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't wake up an expert on the drums. You don't wake up with a higher paycheck. You don't wake up in a higher, in a better job. Don't fool yourself and think that this is going to happen overnight. This is going to take time. And during that time is when you're going to grow as a person, when you're going to grow into something that you weren't before. And that pursuit of who you are and knowing that you want to find out who you truly are will lead you to happiness. And to help us better understand happiness, today on the show I have T.M.Hoy, also known as Mark, author of Lasting Happiness, join us to discuss some of the questions like what is happiness, where does it come from, and how do you get it? And you should know the answers that he provides, he's had a long time to think on those. A lot of time, actually, because in 1995, Mark returned from an overnight business trip to his home in Thailand to find a panicked house guest and a dead person on the floor between them. He only had two choices. One, go immediately to the police and turn in his friend for murder. Or two, help his friend cover it up and pray it was never discovered. Mark, well, he made the wrong choice. He spent 5 years in Thailand's most notorious prison with death and decay surrounding him, his own well-being in constant peril, and happiness an elusive emotion of the past, one he surely never experienced again. But he did. Mark's story will rock your inner core values, which is a good thing because we need to be reminded of what we believe in sometimes. And we can always learn from others' mistakes, and we can always apply their life lessons to our lives. And before the interview, I want to take a moment and show some gratitude. Thank you guys for listening to this episode. Thank you guys for downloading. If this is the first time you've listened to the podcast, make sure to leave a rating and review. And also hit the subscribe button. That way you can get each show each week. And also to all the nurses out there, you guys are doing phenomenal work. And I want to say thank you for all that you do. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Your Superior Self. Tonight's guest, Mark Hoy. He is very special because he has spent a little bit of time in Bangkok, not on vacation, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But Mark, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you so much, Trey. I really, really appreciate being here.
So for a lot of those listeners out there who are, it's the first time hearing of you and your book, why don't you go ahead and give us like a quick rundown about, not quickly, I guess, but what it's about and what you mean by lasting happiness.
Absolutely. Thank you. Lasting happiness, essentially, especially here in the United States, but worldwide, it's a huge problem because people just seem unable to find happiness. And I think the root of it is that we're chasing the wrong things, that what we seek and what we think will bring happiness actually don't. So people are after wealth, they're after fame, they're after power, they're after material things, youth, beauty, all of these things that people traditionally chase or seek. They're just not what leads to happiness. And lasting happiness actually is the product of relationships. And if you step back and you think about, look at your own life, and you really contemplate it, what you're going to find, and because this is nothing new, everybody knows this in their heart, is that happiness comes from healthy relationships. If you've got a good relationship with yourself, and you've got good relationships with the people around you, you're going to have the foundation for a good, happy life. And more than that is the elements of intimacy. Really, what is it that makes you happy? Think about that just for a moment. What it is really is doing the things you love to do with the people you love to have around you. That's the essence of it. It's not money. It's not fame. It's none of the things that we normally chase in day-to-day life. You do need to have your basic needs met. And that is another problem, of course, around the world, that a lot of people just don't have their basic needs met. And so that's a big block to happiness. But how I came to this realization was a really horrific experience where I'm surrounded by death and cruelty for years. And it strips away all your illusions. You really have to realize that when you confront your own mortality, when you're face to face every day, knowing that it could be your last minute, you really have a new approach to things, and it really changes the way you look at the world. So this book is the product of a dozen years of real searching and struggle, scholarly work, and kind of all boiled down. And it's kind of like my magnum opus, my way of sharing, and it's something that I really think is important because the world really needs this right now. There's so much unhappiness in the world. There's so much strife, and I think a lot of it comes from people just chasing the wrong things. That's really what it all boils down to, Trey.
So you are a happiness expert, and what really makes this interesting is that you spent some time in a Thai prison, correct?
Right, correct.
And
Bang Kwang,
how does someone become an expert in happiness after spending 5 years in a Thailand prison?
I think that what comes, well, it begins with your relationship with yourself. You begin there. And for me, I reached a point where I was either there was a very, very limited choice in pathways. Most of the people that go to Thai prison spend time there, usually emerge either hopeless heroin addicts, because that's the drug of choice there. They go insane, or they die. And the death rate was just enormous. So if you don't go those routes, the other route is that you really confront who you are as a person. And you are forced to look at everything about yourself, which I think, especially as Americans, that we have trouble doing, that we don't like to look at ourselves. We don't like to really examine our lives. And so that was where it began, where I'm looking at myself and I'm going, I don't like what I see. I'm not a good person. And that was where the transformation began. Later, the happiness expertise, if you will, came from my searching to kind of fulfill the essence of what I knew. It's sort of like when you discover something, and I discovered that it was very easy to be happy. It doesn't take much. If you have some love in your life and you've got people that care about you, you've got what you need really right there. And so from that, I'm like, okay, so what does happiness consist of? And looking at it deeply, it says, really, you need three things to be happy and have really healthy relationships. One of them is to have love, another is meaning, and the third is creativity. So if you have those three things in your relationships with yourself, with others, and with your community or the world around you, you've got what you need to be happy. The tools on how you do that, which is what the book really is, all these tools and techniques, those are something that came from years and years and years of scholarship, of reading in many, many different disciplines, the different things that scholars and doctors and philosophers have come up with over the millennia, really, that explain how do you create a happy life. The tools and techniques that you need are not easily found, and that's what my book really consists of. So that's kind of the short version of my journey.
Yeah, I mean, that is the short version, but I kind of, and I just kind of want to go over like how you ended up in the prison, because I think it's a good lesson, a good life lesson. So correct me if I'm wrong. So in 1995, you return from an overnight business trip. You go to your home in Thailand.
Right.
And you find a house guest and a dead person on the floor. Is that right?
Not quite. Basically, I had been living in Thailand for quite a while. I was a jeweler, and I'd been, living there, buying and selling gemstones for many years. And so I did return to my house, but I had a guy living with me who I was his conservator. And this is somebody from the United States who wasn't able to read and write. And another dear friend of mine asked me to be a conservator for him, and I agreed. And when I left the United States, I was living in Palm Springs, and I moved to Thailand. And I agreed because he couldn't even use an ATM machine. And so I said, all right, I'll take this guy with me. I'll help him out. And I had a very large house in Chiang Mai. So he was living there, and he was constantly getting into fights with my girlfriend. And so while I was gone on a business trip down to the south to Kanchanaburi, I came back and he had gotten in a huge fight with her and had strangled her.
Mm.
And so at that point, I was terrified. And the police there in Thailand have kind of a deserved reputation as being bad guys. They do torture people. And so I was terrified of going to them. And in retrospect, uh, I did not have a clear head on me at that time, and I made the wrong decision. And what I decided to do as time went by, and I'm terrified, and I'm looking at this horrible situation where there's my girlfriend dead on the floor, there's this guy that I'm responsible for in my house, and hours went by, and finally it reached a point where I felt like I was committed to it. 6 hours had gone by, and I had not acted. And at that point, I said, "All right, I'm gonna help him cover it up." So we did cover up the crime. We slid her body into the river behind my house. My house is right on the River Ping, about 5 kilometers north of Chiang Mai city. And a week later, it was discovered, and we went to prison. And so from that point onward began my journey, which was 5.5 years in prison in Thailand.
Mm. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That
Sure.
is pretty intense.
Yeah.
So talk about like when you first walked in and you discover this had happened. Like what is going through your mind?
Just a combination of terror and horror. I had just devastated by it because, this was a woman that I loved, that I cared about. And to see her dead, and I knew that there had been friction between them, but I had no idea that it had reached that kind of intensity. And he strangled her. And so that was just a truly horrific experience. Um, and not knowing, you kind of feel like you just don't know what to do. You
Mm-hmm.
don't know when you're confronted with something like that. And for myself anyway, I was not really that self-reflective. I hadn't really lived a life of uh, philosophy, if you will. And so when I was confronted with that situation, you just feel trapped. You just feel this terrible panic. And all that is, you're just consumed with that of how do I get out of this? How do I escape this? And unfortunately, I made a terrible, terrible decision. And that led to 18 years, or altogether, 16 years in prison,
Mm.
which, I transferred back from Bangkok, in prison in Bangkok, and ended up transferring back to the United States. And I did another 11 years in prison in the United States.
Mm. Wow. What did he end up getting?
Same exact thing. We were case partners, and we both got identical sentences. Basically, that was a result of the judge. The judge and prosecutor insisted on bribe money. They really didn't want to prosecute. They were very insistent that they wanted money. And when I was arrested, I had $13,000 in my bank account, and that was not sufficient. And they wanted 20 grand at the police station. And I had a week to come up with the other seven, which I just couldn't do. And so then when I went to prison, now there's a judge and a prosecutor that want to be paid. So the price is up to 40,000 US dollars. And there was no way that I could raise that. And so consequently, the judge was insistent. He said, "You either pay me or you're just going to sit here and rot." And finally, after a year, the consul general up there, a guy named Carl, who was a personal friend of mine, the consul at Chiang Mai, the U.S. consul, he said, "This is what I can do." He said, "You're going to die here, Mark." I said, "I know." He said, "I can force the judge to sentence you, but I can't. He's insisting that you plead guilty to murder." And so the police knew better. The documents are clear. Even in Los Angeles, a federal judge, when I transferred back, said, "This is, grossly unjust. I can see that you're not guilty of the crime, but you've pled guilty to it, and it's out of our hands." And I said, "Yeah, I understand that. I understand." So, but in any case, that's the essence of it, and that's uh, you know. But he got the exact same sentence that I did.
I can't even imagine that decision, like to be faced with that, to walk in and see the love of your life strangled there, and then a guy that was living with you, the culprit, the guilty of this action, and then the decisions morally put on you to do what you did, that's a weight that I can't even imagine. I just can't imagine being in that position. And it's just kind of like, what was that conversation like with him?
There really wasn't that much conversation. It was mostly me looking at this mess and then going, "Oh my God." And I immediately reached for the whiskey and I had a couple of stiff drinks, and that doesn't help. And that was where 6 hours are going by where I'm pacing back and forth, going, "Oh my God, what do I do?" And I know the local police. And actually, ironically, later it turned out they were perfect gentlemen, and it was an absolute shock the way they treated me. They were so polite and so sweet. They didn't steal a penny from my bank account or anything. I was shocked, really. They stripped the house bare, of course. It ended up looking like a shell when they were done. I had pictures of it sent to me later, but nonetheless, no, they were very polite with me. But at the time, I'm terrified, and I'm thinking I'm going to be racked up in some torture chamber, and so that was where, I ended up saying, well, I don't want to go there, can't go through that. And had I even had the slightest inkling of what actually happened, it would have been a very, very different situation. And I wouldn't be here talking to you right now. I certainly wouldn't have had the experiences that led to this book, that's for sure.
Well, during that week of before they found the body, like how did you act? How did you go through everyday life? What were you feeling?
Still horrified and not at all normal. Couldn't quite figure out what to do. Knew that this terrible event was life changing, and I knew that we were doomed. It was just a feeling of being doomed, and so I didn't leave Chiang Mai. I was contemplating it, but something. Some people believe in fate or destiny, something like that. And there might be something to that. As I went through that week, it was just something that it was very abnormal. And I couldn't stay in the house. So I'm living in a guest house was in town, 5 kilometers away. Couldn't stand to be there at the house. And I knew that we were doomed. I knew that this was going to end badly. But I just could not see anything. I couldn't see a way forward. I could not see a way to in any way atone for what had happened or make it right. And when they did discover the body and they knew, it was very quick. They found us without too much trouble. We were not. It was not like we were desperate fugitives hiding out or anything like that. We're in a guest house right in downtown Chiang Mai.
Now, was she from Thailand or was she from the States?
Yeah, she was from Thailand. She was from Bangkok.
And then I guess they just, figured it out and then they came and arrested you guys. So, and you said that they wanted money and $40,000 of US dollars. What came next? So you go to prison. What was your first day like?
Well, the police station is different. The police station, they have some cells there. And bribery is rampant in Thailand. So if you have money, you're able to get, pretty much anything you wanted. And they were very, very relaxed with me. The police knew who I was. I mean, I'm a local jeweler, and there was no, that's why they were frustrated, I think. They really believed that I had the money and I was just being a cheapskate. They really believed that. And so there I am going through this horror show emotionally. But in the police station, it's just these cells that are quite small. And you're just sitting there and you're on a bunk. And, we had restaurant food and it was, physically it was relaxed. And then after that week was over, we were transferred to Chiang Mai Remand Prison. And Chiang Mai Remand Prison, if you get a chance, you might want to look at the book I wrote about it. You'd find it fascinating. It's called Rotting in the Bangkok Hilton by Skyhorse Publishing and T.M.Hoy, of course. And it's a series of short stories about my experiences there. And I cover everything from the Chiang Mai prison on the way down to Bangkok. And to sum it all up, Chiang Mai Remand Prison is kind of like, let's see, well, it's a slave labor factory that kills about 30 to 40% of the people that go there. And so every day you have deaths. When I was there was about 1,500 people there. And on average, about 5 to 10 people died every week. And they'd bring a little Chevy Love truck that kind of wheel it through these kind of weird alleyways in the prison itself. Because the prison is just basically these big, it's all of these different things. They make furniture there from illegally logged teak. That's their big thing there. The prison authorities, that's how they make money. And all the prisoners are press ganged into working these factories, except for the foreigners who are kept separate. And so during the day, the ground floor of these huge buildings is all filled with industrial machinery for making furniture and different things and lacquering it. And upstairs are big dormitory style rooms where everybody sleeps on the floor on concrete. And so we were packed in there, 1,500 people into these little chambers, if you will. And you're just surrounded by people dying. And so they feed you really, I wouldn't call it food. It's so bad that actually the cats, they have feral cats that roam the prison to get the rat population under control, and they don't touch it. So wow. The animals don't eat it. And that was what we bathed in dirty river water. And the river Ping is not the cleanest river because they pour their industrial effluents and things into it. And so that's what we bathed in. And people died of tuberculosis, people died of starvation, people died of beatings, people died of peritonitis very frequently, where you swallow some rice and the rice is hard and it pierces your intestines and your intestines leak. And then your stomach swells up and then it bursts and you die. And that was very frequent. And so I was surrounded by that for over a year.
I can imagine that's very depressing, and I can't even imagine.
It's kind of interesting when you're forced to face mortality that way. It's actually very freeing, and you don't. You're kind of forced to reappraise life itself. And as horrific as the conditions may have been, as far as a character change goes, it was very positive, because you really see life and death struggle, and you see the best in people as well as the worst. And it was a wonderful experience from that perspective. So because you choose, you have to choose who are you really going to be? What is it that's important to you? Do you question your values, you question your vision? And that was the transformative part of that ultimately, you make that choice and you say, yeah, you know what? I'm going to live right. I'm going to do the thing that really matters. I'm going to follow what's important. And you transform.
How old were you when you went in?
I was 34.
34. And what was the reception for you as being an American in a Thai prison?
They really enjoy having us there because they can torture us. The authorities are kind of like, Thai society has long been a colony of the United States. Ever since the Vietnam era, we've been there. The king, actually, the former king of Thailand, was born in the United States and was a U.S. citizen. So we had very deep and long ties to Thailand. But the Thai people feel oppressed, and tourists come there. They're wealthy. They spend a lot of money. The Thai people are very poor. And so they really have, there's a smile and there's a facade, and they treat visitors very, very well. But when they have you in their power, when the roles are reversed, when they're no longer the subservient tourist serving Thais, when they have the ability to control your life, they pour all that out, and you really feel the effect of that. So that was the turnaround. It was pretty dramatic.
What were some of the torture techniques that they used?
Well, very, very mostly really, really simple stuff. The withholding of food, of course, that was huge. Um, or you just don't get fed, or they feed you stuff that you can't eat. I had to pay bribes to get food in, and so that's a constant struggle. They discover what it is that you don't like, and work on that. Noise is another one, really really noisy, and no way to filter out the noise really, and overcrowding. Um, they put on average about 10 of us in a room that was about 7 feet by, I guess, about 15, 7 by 15 feet. And and it's just concrete floor with a hole in the back for a toilet. And, there was on average about 10 of us that were in a room that size. It's like it's like a small bathroom, about the size of an American bathroom.
How did the
Yeah.
prisoners react to you? Like, were they very territorial? Were they tribal? Was it kind of threatening? Did they accept you because you were in there with them? How did they react to you?
Actually, in Chiang Mai, you have a very large proportion of hill tribe guys. And hill tribe people are just really sweet, friendly, gentle souls. What happens is that they're preyed upon by drug dealers who they buy the opium there up in the hills in the jungly region north of Chiang Mai. And in fact, that's where most of the opium from the Golden Triangle comes from. So they pay these hill tribe people who use opium as currency. So they don't think anything's wrong with this. And these drug dealers go up into the hills and they say, okay, take this backpack, deliver it to this address here in Chiang Mai. They've never seen a city. These guys have lived their whole lives in the jungle. They've never seen a car. They've never seen concrete. They've never seen a building. And they're directed to take this backpack and show up in Chiang Mai and deliver it for, laughable sums, $40, $50, which in the jungle is a huge amount of money. But they're risking their entire life. And what happens is they're easy to pick out because they're just staring around them in the city and looking around them in astonishment at this, a modern urban city. And the police just pick them up whenever they feel like it. So these guys are what fills the prison system and in northern Thailand. And the hill tribe people are just absolutely wonderful. And it's so sad to see them where they don't speak Thai. They mostly speak English because they get, tourists on elephant. You go up north and you take an elephant trek out into the jungle or whatever. So they pick up English, but they don't speak Thai. They speak their tribal language. So they're completely lost. And unfortunately, they work them to death as slaves. And that's what we were surrounded by, these poor hill tribe guys. And there were Thai prisoners that were the trustees that were nasty. But, the danger wasn't really from the people. The same thing was true in Bang Kwang, which is the death prison where they have executions there, and it's where lifers are sent, which is where we were sent because we ended up receiving a death sentence, and then that was commuted to life. And so when we went down to Bangkok, again, no problem at all from the Thais. Generally speaking, very decent people. And so, no, there was no trouble from prisoners. There was a lot of death, but it was from the conditions. And so you die from diseases, you die from dirty water, you die from dirty food, you die from just, not having any health care at all, really. And so what would, normally be a little minor cut in the tropics swells up into this terrible infection, and you can't get antibiotics, so you die. And that's the kind of thing that you're surrounded by. The people themselves, there was no problem. I don't have the usual vices. I don't gamble. I don't do drugs. And so I missed out on pretty much all the drama. But you're surrounded by all of this incredible cruelty and death and indifference towards human life. And that was what was transformative. So,
What was like your most memorable moment there?
the most memorable moment that I had was going this trip down, taking the van. They picked us up in a van at Chiang Mai when we finally got sentenced, and we were moving down south. And there was a hill tribe guy that was in the van with us. And he was so sweet and happy and gentle. And I struck up a conversation with him, and he showed me his paperwork. He didn't even know that he'd received a life sentence. And I'm
Wow.
reading his court paperwork because I could read Thai in a primitive way. And I explained to him, and I said, I have some bad news for you. You've got a life sentence. And he was like, okay, yeah, no sweat. And I was like, do you understand? Do you really comprehend this? And he was like, yeah, I do. And don't worry about it. It's okay. He was more concerned for me. He was concerned at my health and my state of mind. And we chatted, and he was just so at peace with himself and so mellow and relaxed, and just a wonderful energy about this guy. And on that trip, on that journey, which took about 10 hours, that was where it really began for me, when I looked at him and saying, wow, he knows he's going to go to this prison, and he's probably going to die there. He's never going to have touch with his family again. He has received a really grossly unjust sentence, because for him, what he did, he didn't even know it was a crime. He was backpacking opium, which they use as currency up in the hills. And yet there he is with this horrific, future, and this sad, tragic past, and he's completely at peace. And I realized, after talking to him, and he pointed up at the sky. He's like, "Look, the sky's not falling. It's not the end of the world. I'm okay, and we're okay. Look at us. We're in decent shape. Uh, uh, you know." And it really stopped me in my tracks, and I really had to think seriously about who I was and what my take on the world was. And that experience with that guy, I think, was the most profound one that I had there in Thai prison.
Wow. That really makes you think about where he came from
Right,
to be in that position, and
right.
think about all the things that aren't happening to him, that the sky isn't falling and he's breathing and he's above ground, and to be showing gratitude towards life
Hmm.
when
Absolutely.
he's getting ready to spend the rest of his life in hell,
Right, right. And being okay and being good.
and being okay with that.
Yeah, and being good, and realizing that, what, it's okay. And that was a tremendous mental a shock, as well as a transformative event. Yeah.
But where do you think that comes from? Because obviously, is that a culture thing? Because you look at America and you see that people aren't like that. They stress over the little things.
Mhm.
What do you think empowers that?
Yeah, part of it's the Buddhism. They have a very strong Buddhist tradition there, and the essence of that is um, mindfulness. Being mindful, and being conscious of being present in the moment, not living in the future, not living in the past, and that's a huge factor.
Mm.
Another one is, kind of a resignation, an acceptance of one's fate, and not stressing about it, saying, yeah, if this is the way it is, this is the way it is. So there's cultural things, and there's religious aspects of it. But I think also that you have, I think with that particular gentleman, that there are people that are transcendent. There are people that are closer to enlightenment than others, and I think that I just happened to run into one at the right time, who had reached that stage in the journey of life where they're at peace with themselves.
Mm.
And he was definitely an unusual individual to run into on a prison bus going down south to Bangkok. That's for sure.
Have you ever reached enlightenment yourself?
I've had many, many interesting experiences that way. I've spent a lot of time uh, in a spiritual search, if you will, and for many years, actually, there in Thai prison, I did shamanism. Um, there's an excellent book called The Urban Shaman by Kahili King. I recommend it to you. And it gives these exercises, and many of them do focus on um, the way that we perceive reality, and changing that, and realizing that there's a lot more dreamlike elements in reality than we think. And So I have experienced, and I did meditate a lot. I did some transcendental meditation, and I've had some really, yeah, some really intense experiences spiritually, for sure. I don't know. I don't think enlightenment would be the right way to describe it, but certainly a realization, cosmic realizations, uh, they're there if you want to reach for them. And it boils down, in my opinion anyway, to reaching for something greater than the self.
Hmm.
You're reaching out for something that is, the eternal and the infinite, and a deeper contemplation of those things, even like contemplating beauty, for example. Um, if you do that in a mindful way, that it opens doors to that realm. And if you want to call it spiritual, you can. But it is something that is beyond the human sphere, beyond our mortality. And yeah, I've been through that door a few times, and feel very grateful that I was able to have those experiences.
Yeah, I mean, you're grateful that you made it through the Bangkok prison system, right? I mean, that is a, you said that the mortality rate is like what, 40%?
30, 40%, yeah.
30, 40%.
Yeah, if you don't
And
die, you go out crazy, So that's the sad.
do you think that you didn't do either one of those because you're meant for something higher?
I think that there is an element there. I think that what I produced here, this book, Lasting Happiness, I really believe that this could have a major impact if it reaches a wide enough audience. Um, it the Here's the thing, Trey. We know in our hearts what makes us happy. We know that already. And people recognize these things when you talk to them. They stop in their tracks and they go, God, you know what? You're right. I know that already. It's like, absolutely. You know what it is in your heart that makes you happy. You don't need to go searching for it. And the essence of what the book does, and the reason why I think I survived, is that this is really important, that people understand that they don't need to do these things. They don't need to spend their life chasing somebody else's dream. They don't need to get involved in these terrible things that, our daily life is filled with all of these things, with strife and conflict and competition and struggle. And it's completely unnecessary especially here in the West, it's just not that hard to make a decent living. And if you've got that, if you've got shelter, if you've got food, and you've got enough to take care of your basic needs, you've got what you need to take that next step and find out, okay, what is it that I really love? What is it that I really care about? And that's what you need to explore. And the book gives all the tools you need to make that a reality, to fulfill that. And so, yeah, I think I did survive for a reason. I think that this is something that needs to be out there, and that people need to read and realize, because it's not so much new as it is simply stopping for a little while and contemplating and thinking through. The tools and techniques are hard to find, for sure, but the essence of the message is very simple, and I think most people recognize the truth of it when they see
Well,
it.
everybody wants to find happiness. Everybody, that is the mission in life, right? To find mission or happiness. Why is it so hard?
Again, it goes back to the fact people are chasing the wrong things. That you hear all of these voices telling you. You've got advertisers, you've got your relatives, you've got people in power, you've got authority figures, and all of them are pushing their own vision of what quote unquote happiness is. So you have people that spend their whole life on a treadmill that are chasing a bigger house and a bigger car. There's people that are after status symbols. There's people that spend all of their time trying to become famous. There's people that are chasing, all of these different things, and they don't lead to happiness. And when you look at your average person, they're trapped in what I call the social game. And there's a lot of different factors involved, and I won't get bogged down with it. But the essence of it is that you spend your life supporting something that you don't really necessarily want. And I think that that's why so many people are unhappy, that they're following this path that's been laid out for them without ever stopping and thinking, wait a minute, do I really want this? Is this, you know, I mean, take for example somebody who is in a job they don't like. If they were to stop and say, okay, would I be willing to take a pay cut if I was doing something I enjoyed? If they made that thought and that decision, it would transform their life. So maybe they don't want to be somebody in a factory grinding out widgets every day and working their butt off for that, number of hours. Maybe they'd be happy as a gardener. It might be a big pay cut, but their happiness would just skyrocket. And so that's the kind of contemplation that I think the average person never actually, they don't see the box they're in. They don't see the mental traps and cages that are erected around them enough to be able to free themselves and say, wow, what is it that I really need to be happy and transform their life to do it? Not particularly, it's not simple. But it is accessible. It's real. They could do it if they wanted to.
Did you ever find happiness in the prison?
I found a certain amount of contentment. Yeah, I wouldn't say happy. There was too much horror all around, even in the prison system in the United States, where they're much better about your physical care, but mentally it's actually worse. But I did find a contentment because I was working on something important. I wrote 3 different books while I was in prison, and I did a huge amount of research. And I was very, very fortunate. I had my family supported me. They were wonderful. They were there for me. I had some wonderful friends that were there, and very, 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 very lucky that way, having really good people in my life. And so all of these people were very supportive. And I had books. I had access to different kinds of materials that I needed. And so I was able to make my time in prison very productive. And that was an enormous assistance. And that really transformed the whole experience for me. I had contentment, of a kind.
Even though you were physically in a prison, I think that we all have our own. Like, we all have our own prisons, and it might not be like your example. It might be living in the suburbs in a big house with a car and a job that we don't like. But I think the important part is finding that content, finding that fulfillment. And like you were saying, some of the examples of trying to rectify where you're at in your life is maybe you need to take a job or a pay cut. Maybe you need to find that job, whatever fulfills you, whatever makes you happy, you have to pursue it. Now, I think it's so interesting about the story about the prisoner who had a life sentence, and he was just happy to be alive. And that is so powerful to me. And I think that we just lose that focus here in the States because our sense of entitlement. I think we think we're entitled to these things, and the cost of living is so high, and we're always trying to keep up with the Joneses, and we need to make sure that we send our kids to the best schools, and we buy the nicest clothes to feel acceptance. And that guy didn't need any of that. He just needed air. He just needed sun beating down on him. He just needed, like you said, living in the moment. And I wish I was better at that. I wish I was where my feet are at the moment. And it was so powerful just listening to your story and hearing that part of it. It's so interesting to me because you're in the worst case scenario, and to be able to say, well, I'm still here is so powerful to me.
I'm glad that moved you. And I Trey, you get exposed to a lot of different people. You've chosen a very interesting subject to explore. And that's what those experiences do, is they strip away everything. They force you to really look at the fundamentals. And I think that what you would find if you did that with your own situation is just to look really hard about what it is that you are passionate about and that you love. And you're already doing that. You're creating this podcast, which is wonderful. You're helping a lot of people. You're helping transform lives. And I'm sure that that's a core part of who you are and what's important to you. But if you really look at your overall existence and maybe strip away some of the stuff that doesn't really, help out, that isn't leading in that fulfillment of those passions, that letting those things drop away, I think, and focusing more on what really matters, what is really important. And for many, many people, I'd say for the majority of people, it's family and friends, and of course, something that's an interest, a real passion in life. And that is where you're going to find a really fulfilling existence, is sharing that thing you're passionate about and focusing on that. And that is what is missing from most people's lives. Excuse me. That's what's missing from most people's lives, I think, is that they're not focused on what they're passionate about. They're focused on the material things, and those don't bring
Now, when
happiness.
people say I don't know what I'm passionate about, like, what's your answer to them? How do they find what they are passionate about?
Well, there's the quick and dirty way, which is where you face your own mortality, and there's different ways to do that. I give one example in my book about how the Japanese do it, where they had a kind of a ritual that they followed. It came from the feudal period in Japan, the 16th centuries, where if you were going to commit suicide, you were forced to commit what they called seppuku, which the daimyo would tell the samurai, "You've dishonored yourself, or you've dishonored me," and commit suicide. And they'd have an hour to prepare themselves. And in that period, they'd reflect on their life. And you can do that. It's not that difficult an exercise. It's very emotionally intense. But you say, you know what, I'm gonna die, and everybody is gonna die actually, but just not in the next hour. And so you could do that exercise, and as I said, I do lay it out in the book. But something that maybe is a little bit more accessible to the average person, that doesn't require this intense emotional experience, would just be to go to where people are ill and dying, maybe volunteer at a hospital, maybe volunteer at an elderly care facility for a couple of days. Anybody can go to a chaplain or go to there's different people that provide visiting services to these places, and say, you know what, I'd appreciate it if I could have the opportunity just to visit for a little while, and maybe visit somebody who's lonely in an elderly care home, or maybe go to a hospital and visit somebody who's terminally ill or very ill. And that experience is going to be enough, I think, to jog you and force you to realize just how short life is. And that experience is going to transform and get you in touch with what's really important, because you're dealing with people who are at the end of life. And you're dealing with people who have that wisdom, who say to you, yeah, this is what I regret. This is what I did not do. This is what I did not achieve. And you'll have that opportunity to say to yourself, wow, that's right. This is what matters. And so emotionally, it's not easy, but the process is actually very simple. And so for anybody serious about meaning, that's a quick way to find out what's important to you. It's just to really confront mortality and say, yeah, what is it that I want to achieve before I die? What do I want my life to be and represent? And those value questions and those vision questions are what going to lead you, are what going to lead you to a meaningful life.
What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to remember you by? Like, are you trying to make a atonement for what happened? Or is this your way of changing the way that mankind thinks?
It's a combination of those things. I really feel that this is something that I'm kind of a way of giving back, certainly. I'm very desperately concerned about the state of our planet. I think anybody who's conscious in any way can't help but be sympathetic to the social justice and environmental justice movements, and I'm very, very concerned about that. The ecosystem of the planet, they're collapsing, and climate change is making it worse. And so we're kind of reaching the end stages of industrial capitalism. We've done tremendous damage to the planet. And so my hope is that I'm able to contribute something to try and change that. And if people were willing to rein in the corporations a little bit, to demand decent behavior from them, and in their own personal life, to shift from materialism to a more relationship focused, if you will, life, where you're focused on parties and you're focused on gardens and you're focused on libraries and you're focused around loving the people around you. That to me, it's a richer life. but it's also much easier on the planet. And so that's what I'm hoping my legacy will be, that I was able to contribute in some way to that transformative process. And I'm hoping that that's something that, and I'm working very hard towards that. There's a lot of really wonderful people already working doing that. I cite their work in my book. Naomi Klein is one, a brilliant woman who's written many books on that subject with climate change. Paul Hawken, written some wonderful books, an environmental activist for many years. He's created a foundational organization that unifies all of these different organizations fighting for social and environmental justice. Just some wonderful people out there doing that, and I'm trying my best to join in and try and make a difference while there's still time.
Mark, I could talk to you literally all night.
Thank you, Trey. It was wonderful. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Sure. So let everybody know how they can connect with you.
Okay, absolutely. Well, there's several ways. Of course, the book is available at all major retailers. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, iTunes, available all those places. You can connect with me personally through my website, lastinghappiness.net. The name of the book itself is Lasting Happiness, Secrets of the Heart, Mind, and Spirit Revealed by T.M.Hoy. And I would absolutely love to hear from you. Just visit the website, and there's comment sections on every different page. Leave a comment, and I guarantee you I'll get back.
Well, Mark, as you know, at the end of the show, I like to have you, the guest, kind of talk me up a little bit, give me a little inspiration, a little pep talk. And my scenario for you is, let's say, because this show is all about being your superior self. Let's say I might be coming back into society from a prison, or I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to better myself and make up for some of the crimes that I may have committed or may not have committed. Let's say I'm just trying to be a better person. What is your advice for that person? How do I become my superior self?
I think at the heart of all of it has to do with empathy and compassion for other people. And so it's about connection. And I think that the best way forward would be simply to find the people that you care about and connect with them and do something decent. And that is going to start a cycle of a virtuous cycle of better and better, where maybe it starts really small. Maybe it's just one person that you get in contact with and you say, you know what? I didn't do right by you. Let me help transform that. Let me change that. Let me make that right if I can. And it starts there. And it snowballs. And so compassion and empathy are the core of an ethical life, really, having empathy and compassion for others. And if you begin that process that way, if you step out of this coercive environment of prison, you leave that environment and now you're back in society. And if you come in from a perspective of humility and gratitude and wanting to connect with other people in a positive way, that would be my advice. I would say that's the way forward, that you're going to have a really, really good relationship with others based on that. Find something that you care about. Find something that you love doing, and let that be the focus of what you're going to do with your life in a positive way. Help other people do what you love doing already. And that, I think, would be the way forward to make your own little slice of paradise.
He is T.M.Hoy, author of Rotting in the Bangkok Hilton, along with Lasting Happiness. Go out and purchase his books. Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show. It truly has been a great experience talking to you. And trust me, I've gotten a lot of powerful insight from your experience. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It was wonderful to be here, Trey. Thank you so much for having me on. And hopefully we'll talk again very soon.
Wow, that was a crazy interview. That was an awesome interview. I want to say thank you to Mark Hoy for coming on the show and sharing your story. Pick up his book called Lasting Happiness. Wow. So I've been to Thailand one time, and that was in college. And you don't even realize the dangers that surround you in foreign countries. Like, you just don't understand. Like, I didn't understand, I guess, because of my age and maturity level of the different cultures and the different belief systems that are in place outside of the United States. So to all my world travelers out there, be safe. Make sure you guys do some research before you enter a country. Try to get familiar with their cultures and their society. I know today's interview kind of definitely rocked your core value systems, which I don't think is a bad thing, because we all need to be reminded of what we believe in. So I just want to say thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for taking the time out of your day, out of your busy week, and hanging out with us and hanging out with me. And if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, you can hit me up on TDowns80. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Downs Trey. Hit me up on Facebook, Trey Downs. I'm starting a new YouTube channel. It's called, obviously, Trey Downs, but it's going to be a little bit different, a little bit raw as far as me putting out rants about my beliefs and my opinions. And so check me out over there. Subscribe to that channel. Hit me up. Let me know what you guys think. All right, guys. I'll talk to you guys next week. Later.